The Galactic Integration Academy floated in the empty space between three star systems. It was a massive station, built over 300 years by dozens of species working together. Every year, thousands of students came here to learn. They came from warm planets and cold planets, from worlds with thick air and worlds with almost no air at all. They came to understand each other, to study together, and to prepare for life in a galaxy full of strange and wonderful beings. Instructor Ridiculed had taught at this academy for a very long time. He was a Silithian, a species known for their intelligence and their long lives. His body was covered in scales that changed color with his mood, shifting from deep blue when he was calm to bright orange when he was angry. He had 4 arms, each ending in delicate fingers perfect for writing and pointing at students who gave wrong answers. His eyes were large and yellow, and they missed nothing. Ridiculed taught advanced survival sciences. It was a difficult class. Students learned about dangerous environments, hostile planets, and how different species adapted to stay alive. He was proud of his work. He believed he was the best teacher in the academy, and he made sure everyone knew it. On the first day of the new term, Ridiculed received a message on his datapad. He read it twice, then made a sound of annoyance. His scales flickered orange for just a moment before returning to blue. But Human was joining his class. Humans were new to the galaxy. Their species had only discovered faster-than-light travel 10 years ago. Before that, they had been trapped on their single planet, completely alone. Ridiculed had read about them, of course. Everyone had. The humans came from a world called Earth, a planet so dangerous that the Galactic Council had classified it as a Category 12, Deathworld. The classification system went from 1 to 15. Most species came from worlds rated between 1 and 5. Comfortable worlds. Safe worlds. Worlds where life had time to grow and think and build civilizations without constantly fighting to survive. Category 12 was almost unheard of. It meant that Earth was a place of constant danger, where everything seemed designed to kill. Ridiculed found this amusing. He imagined that humans must be simple creatures, spending all their time just trying not to die. How could they possibly keep up with students from proper civilizations? The classroom filled with students before the lecture began. There were Pelori in the front row, their round bodies covered in soft fur that changed color to show their emotions. Behind them sat a group of Vethkai, crystalline beings who communicated through vibrations and light. Morath students filled the middle rows, their 4 eyes blinking in different patterns as they prepared their note-taking devices. There were a dozen other species as well, all shapes and sizes, all waiting for the lesson to begin. Then she walked in. The human was small. Much smaller than Ridiculed had expected. She stood on 2 legs, like many species did, but she had no scales, no fur, no shell. Her skin was bare and soft, a light brown color that seemed terribly fragile. Her hair was dark and pulled back from her face. Her eyes were brown, simple and plain, with no special features that Ridiculed could see. She wore the standard academy uniform, which looked strange on her small frame. She carried a simple bag over one shoulder. She moved quietly, looking around the room with an expression that Ridiculed could not read. The other students stared at her. Some whispered to each other. A few of the Pelori made small sounds of surprise. Everyone had heard about humans, but very few had actually seen one in person. Ridiculed decided this was the perfect teaching moment. "Ah," he said, his voice filling the room. "Our Deathworld specimen has arrived." Some students laughed. Others looked uncomfortable. The human girl stopped walking and looked at the instructor. "Class, I want you to observe carefully," Ridiculed continued. "This is a human. Species designation, Homo sapiens. Origin, Earth, Sol System. Galactic contact. less than one standard decade. He gestured toward her with two of his arms. "Tell me, human, what is your name?" "Mei-chan," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Mei-chan," Keth Valen repeated, making the name sound like a joke. "Well, Mei-chan, perhaps you can help us begin today's lesson. On your homeworld, what percentage of your day do you spend simply trying not to die?" More laughter from the class. May looked at the instructor for a long moment. Her face showed nothing. No anger, no embarrassment, no fear. Just calm observation. "I am not sure I understand the question," she said. "Of course you don't," Keth Valen replied. "Let me explain for the class. Earth is a Category 12 death world. The gravity is crushing. The atmosphere is filled with a corrosive gas called oxygen. The planet is covered in a substance called water, which is a universal solvent that can dissolve almost anything. The star that Earth orbits constantly bombards the surface with deadly radiation. And yet somehow, life exists there. Primitive, struggling life that spends every moment fighting against a planet that wants to kill it." He looked at May with something like pity in his yellow eyes. "Please, find a seat. Try to keep up with the lesson if you can. I understand that your species has limited cognitive abilities compared to more advanced civilizations." May said nothing. She walked to an empty seat in the back of the room and sat down. She took out a small device for taking notes and placed it on her desk. Her movements were calm and unhurried. Keth Valen felt satisfied. He had established a proper order of things. The human would learn her place, and the other students would see that death world species, despite their dramatic origins, were nothing special. They were survivors, perhaps, but surviving was not the same as thriving. Any simple animal could survive. It took true intelligence to build a civilization. As he began his lecture on atmospheric adaptation, Keth Valen occasionally glanced at the human in the back row. She was writing notes, her strange flat face showing no expression. She did not ask questions. She did not react to the other students who turned to stare at her. She just watched. And listened. And wrote. Keth Valen did not think much of it at the time. He had no way of knowing that those quiet brown eyes were not just observing the lecture. They were observing everything. The room, the students, the instructor himself. Every detail, every weakness, every assumption. On Earth, May's ancestors had survived ice ages and plagues, predators and famines, wars and disasters. They had learned that the most important skill was not strength or speed. It was patience. It was watching. It was waiting for the right moment. Mei-chan had plenty of patience, and she was very, very good at waiting. 6 weeks passed at the Galactic Integration Academy. For most students, these weeks were filled with learning and growing and making friends from distant stars. For Mei-chan, they were something else entirely. Keth Valen had found his favorite target. Every lecture became an opportunity to remind the class that humans were primitive, weak, and barely civilized. When he taught about species with multiple hearts, he would call May to the front of the room. "The human has only one heart," he would explain, pointing at her chest with one of his 4 arms. "A single point of failure. If it stops, she dies." Most intelligent species evolved backup systems millions of years ago. Humans never developed this basic survival adaptation. When he taught about natural armor and protective shells, he would gesture toward her again. "Notice the human skin. No scales, no shell, no protective plating of any kind. She could be injured by something as simple as a sharp rock or a pointed stick. Her species is so fragile that their own planet's star can burn their skin if they stand outside too long." The other students learned to join in. The Pelori in the front row would make sounds of mock sympathy when May was mentioned. The crystalline Veth guy would flash colors of amusement at each other. Even some of the quieter species started to see the human as a joke. One day, a Pelori student named Thax blocked May's path in the hallway. "Is it true," Thax asked, his fur rippling with amusement, "that humans have to consume dead plant and animal matter multiple times every single day just to stay alive?" "Yes," May said simply. "And you have to unconscious for hours every night? Your brain just stops working? We call it sleep." Thax laughed, a series of high-pitched sounds that made other students in the hallway stop and watch. "How did your species survive long enough to build spaceships? You spend half your life eating and sleeping, and the other half trying not to fall over." May looked at him with her calm brown eyes. "We managed," she said, and walked around him. The mockery continued in small ways every day. Students would move away when she sat down in the dining hall. They would whisper when she walked past. They would ask her questions designed to embarrass her. "Is it true your species used to kill each other in massive organized conflicts? Is it true you keep predator animals in your homes as companions? Is it true you consume a poison called alcohol for entertainment?" To all of these questions, May simply answered yes. She did not explain. She did not defend. She did not argue. She just confirmed the facts and moved on. Kethvilen noticed that the human never seemed upset. This bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He had seen other students from lesser species crumble under the pressure of being different. They would cry or complain or drop out of his class entirely. But May just kept coming back, day after day, sitting in the same seat, taking her notes in silence. He decided to push harder. "Today we will discuss pursuit predation," Kethvilen announced one morning. This is an extremely rare hunting strategy in the galaxy. Most predator species rely on speed or stealth or superior strength. But a few primitive species developed a different method. They would follow their prey for hours, sometimes days, never attacking, just following, until the prey animal collapsed from exhaustion and terror. He paused and looked directly at May. Humans are pursuit predators. Their ancestors would chase animals across vast distances, not to catch them, but to break them psychologically, to make them give up. Some scientists believe this is why humans have such limited intelligence. Their brains evolved for one purpose: to keep following, to never stop, to never give up the chase. There was no room left for higher thinking. The class laughed. May wrote something in her notes. "I wonder," Kethvilen continued, enjoying himself now, "if this explains why humans are so stubborn. They cannot help it. Their primitive brains are simply programmed to keep going forward, even when they should clearly stop and admit defeat." He waited for some reaction from the human. A flash of anger. A look of shame. Anything. May looked up from her notes and met his eyes. For just a moment, Kethvilen felt something strange. A small feeling in his stomach that he did not recognize. Then May looked back down at her notes, and the feeling passed. Weeks went by. May attended every class. She completed every assignment. Her scores were not the highest in the class, but they were far from the lowest. She never complained. She never asked for special treatment. She never tried to make friends, but she was always watching. She noticed that Kethvilen's scales turned pale when he was nervous, even though he tried to hide it. She noticed that the Pelori became clumsy when the room temperature dropped. She noticed that the Vethkai could not process sudden loud sounds. She noticed that the Morith had blind spots in their vision because of how their four eyes were positioned. She noticed everything. In her small room at night, May would review her notes, not just the academic material, but her observations about every species she had encountered. Their strengths, their weaknesses, their fears. She organized this information carefully, the way her ancestors had once cataloged the habits of animals they hunted. She was not planning revenge. She was not angry. She was simply doing what humans had always done when faced with a hostile environment. She was learning how to survive. And somewhere deep in her human brain, in the parts that remembered ice ages and saber-toothed cats and the long, hungry nights of prehistoric Earth, another instinct was waking up. The instinct to hunt. May did not know when she would need this information. She did not know what situation would finally require her to use it. But she knew, with the patient certainty that only a pursuit predator could have, that the moment would come, and when it did, she would be ready. For now. She just smiled politely when the other students mocked her. She answered their questions honestly. She sat quietly in HFY's class and let him use her as an example of everything primitive and weak. Let them underestimate her. Let them think she was harmless. Let them believe that being from a death world made her inferior. Instead of dangerous. They would learn the truth eventually. They always did. The midterm examination was the most important test of the semester. Every student in advanced survival sciences had to enter the simulation chamber and prove they could survive in a hostile environment. The chamber used advanced technology to create perfect copies of real planetary conditions. The heat was real. The cold was real. The danger felt real, even though the computer would stop the simulation before any student could actually be harmed. Each student was assigned an environment based on their species and skill level. The Pelori would face mild challenges, perhaps a world slightly colder than their home. The Vethkai would deal with environments that tested their crystal structures. The assignments were supposed to be fair, pushing students to their limits without being impossible. HFY had other plans for the human. When the assignment list was posted, May found her name at the bottom. Next to it was a code she did not recognize. She asked the Academy computer to explain. Environment designation, Volcanic Prime 7, the computer said. Classification, Category 7 hostile environment. Features include active volcanic activity, toxic atmospheric compounds, extreme temperature variations between day and night, and native predatory life forms rated as highly dangerous. May looked at the code for a long moment. Then she nodded and went to prepare. The other students heard about her assignment. Some felt sorry for her. Category 7 was far beyond what any student should face in a midterm exam. But most assumed that HFY knew what he was doing. If the instructor thought the human could handle it, then surely it was appropriate. On the day of the exam, students gathered in the viewing gallery above the simulation chamber. They could watch through transparent walls as their classmates faced their challenges. Most simulations lasted between 1 and 3 hours. The current record for the longest survival time was 4 hours and 22 minutes, set by a Morris student 3 years ago. May entered the chamber last. She wore simple clothing, the kind that would not help her in any environment. She had no tools, no supplies, nothing but her own body and mind. HFY stood at the control panel, his scales bright with anticipation. Several other instructors had come to watch. Word had spread that something interesting was going to happen. Begin simulation, HFY said. The chamber transformed. The walls disappeared, replaced by a landscape of black rock and red fire. Volcanoes rose in the distance, their peaks glowing with molten lava. The air filled with ash and the smell of sulfur. The temperature climbed rapidly. In the viewing gallery, students watched as May looked around at her new environment. The Pelori expected her to panic. The Vethkai expected her to cry. Everyone expected her to fail within the first few minutes. May did not panic. She did not cry. She started walking. First, she found a volcanic vent that released gas at regular intervals. She watched it for several minutes, timing the releases. Then she tore a piece of cloth from her uniform and held it over the vent during one of the releases. The The chemicals in the gas reacted with the cloth, creating a simple filter that she tied over her mouth and nose. The students in the gallery went quiet. By the end of the first hour, May had found a lava tube, a natural tunnel created by flowing lava long ago. The temperature inside was more stable. She used sharp volcanic glass to cut branches from the few hardy plants that grew in sheltered areas. She built a small barrier at the entrance of the tube to block wind, and the instructors began exchanging glances. By hour 3, May had created fire, not from the lava around her, but from friction, rubbing sticks together the way her ancestors had done for thousands of years. She used the fire to purify water that she had collected from steam vents. She ate insects that lived in the cracks of the rocks, knowing somehow that they were safe to consume. The viewing gallery was completely silent now. By hour 6, everything changed. A predator found her. It was massive, twice her size, with thick scales that protected it from the heat and sharp claws designed for killing. It had many eyes that could see in multiple directions at once. It was fast. It was strong. It was designed by evolution to be the perfect killer on this volcanic world. It found May's cave and came inside. The students expected the simulation to end. The computer was supposed to stop the test when a student was in real danger. But the simulation continued. Either the computer did not think May was in danger, or something had gone wrong with the safety systems. May did not run. She could not outrun this creature, and she knew it. Instead, she picked up a long stick she had sharpened earlier. She stood very still. She waited. The predator charged. What happened next was too fast for most species to follow. May moved to the side at the last moment. She used the creature's own speed against it, letting it crash into the wall of the cave while she drove her sharpened stick into a gap in its scales. The creature screamed and turned, but May was already moving, already finding another angle, already striking again. The fight lasted less than 2 minutes. When it was over, May stood over the body of the predator, breathing hard but alive. She had wounds on her arms and legs where the creature had clawed her. Blood ran down her skin, bright red against the black volcanic ash that covered her. She looked up at where she knew the viewing gallery was, even though she could not see through the simulation. Her eyes found Kethvalen's position exactly. Then she went back to work. She used the creature's claws as tools. She used its scales as material for better shelter. She used its meat as food. The simulation was designed to last 12 hours maximum. When the computer finally ended the test, May had built a sustainable camp. She had fire, water, shelter, food, and weapons. She was in the process of crafting a bow from the creature's bones and tendons. The chamber returned to normal. The volcanic world disappeared, replaced by clean white walls and standard station lighting. May walked out of the chamber. She was covered in ash and blood and sweat. Her uniform was torn. Her hair was wild. She had cuts and burns on her skin that would need medical attention. She looked at Kethvalen, who had not moved from the control panel. His scales had gone completely pale, a color that his species only showed when they were truly afraid. Next, May asked. Her voice was calm. Almost bored. No one answered. No one knew what to say. They had just watched a small, soft, primitive human do something that should have been impossible. They had watched a Deathworld species do what Deathworld species were born to do: survive. 3 days passed after the simulation. May spent one of those days in the medical center, where doctors treated her wounds and marveled at how quickly her body was already healing itself. Human regeneration was not the fastest in the galaxy, but it was remarkably efficient. The doctors noted that her immune system seemed to attack infections with unusual aggression, and that her pain tolerance was far higher than they had expected. When May returned to class, something had changed. The other students no longer laughed when she entered the room. The Pelori did not make jokes about her. The Vethkai did not flash colors of amusement. Instead, they watched her with new expressions: curiosity, uncertainty, and for some, the beginning of fear. Kethvalen pretended nothing had happened. He began his lecture on atmospheric adaptation as if the simulation had never occurred. But his voice was different, quieter, less confident. His scales kept shifting to pale colors before he forced them back to blue. He could not stop thinking about what he had seen. A small human girl, alone, with no tools and no help, had killed an apex predator with a sharpened stick. She had done it calmly, efficiently, without hesitation. She had done it like it was something she had always known how to do. Today we continue our discussion of atmospheric challenges, Kethvalen said. As I have mentioned before, humans breathe oxygen, a highly reactive gas that most species find toxic. This is one of many examples of how Deathworld species develop unusual, Instructor Kethvalen. The voice came from the back of the room. May had stood up. Her wounds were still visible, covered in healing patches that the medical center had applied. She looked tired, but her eyes were clear and focused. Kethvalen stopped mid-sentence. You do not have permission to speak. Sit down. I would like to offer a correction to your lecture. There is nothing to correct. Sit down immediately. You have been teaching incorrect information for 6 weeks. I think the class deserves to know the truth. The room was completely silent. No student had ever spoken to Kethvalen this way. The instructor's scales flashed orange with anger, but underneath the orange, pale fear was visible. You will sit down, Kethvalen said, his voice shaking slightly. Or you will be removed from this class permanently. May did not sit down. She started walking toward the front of the room. Her steps were slow and steady. She was not rushing. She was not aggressive. But something about the way she moved made students press back in their seats. You have called humans weak, May said as she walked. You have called us primitive, fragile, barely civilized. You have used me as an example of everything wrong with Deathworld species. She passed the Pelori students. Their fur had gone flat against their bodies, a sign of fear. Let me tell you about Earth. She passed the Vethkai. Their crystals were vibrating at frequencies that meant distress. Our planet's gravity is 1.4 times the galactic standard. Every human who has ever lived has trained against resistance that would crush most species in this room. We do not notice it because we have never known anything else. But every step we take, every movement we make, builds strength that we do not even realize we have. She passed the Moreth students. All 4 of their eyes were fixed on her, unable to look away. You said we breathe a toxic gas. You are correct. Oxygen is a poison that destroys cells and causes decay. We breathe it because our ancestors learned to use poison as fuel. Our bodies burn oxygen like fire. It gives us energy that other species cannot match. When we run, when we fight, when we push ourselves to our limits, we are burning a substance that would kill most life forms in the galaxy. She reached the front of the room. She stood only a few feet from Kethvalen now. You said we are pursuit predators. You made it sound like a weakness. Let me tell you what pursuit predation really means. Her voice was still calm, almost gentle, but there was something underneath it now. Something old and patient and absolutely certain. It means we do not stop, ever. Our ancestors did not have claws or fangs or venom. They did not have speed or strength or armor. So they learned to follow. They learned to walk when their prey ran. They learned to keep going when their prey had to rest. They learned to track and hunt and wait until their prey's heart gave out from fear and exhaustion. She took one more step forward. Kethvalen stepped back without realizing it. Do you know what happens to an animal when it is chased by something that never gets tired? When it runs and runs and runs, and every time it looks back, the hunter is still there? Not closer, not attacking, just following, always following. Her brown eyes held his yellow ones. He could not look away. The animal goes mad. Its body breaks down. Its heart fails. It collapses and waits to die, because death is better than being chased by something that will not stop. The silence in the room was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. Our bones break and heal stronger. Our immune systems remember every disease that ever tried to kill us and develop weapons against them. We domesticated wolves, the greatest pack predators on our world, by being more frightening than they were. We climbed to the top of a food chain filled with creatures that were faster, stronger, and more deadly than us. And we did it by being the thing that nothing else wanted to be. She leaned slightly closer to Keth Valen. The thing that never stops. Keth Valen's mouth opened. He wanted to say something. He needed to respond, to take back control, to prove that he was still the authority in this room. But when he looked into the human's eyes, something happened. Something he had never experienced before, deep in his brain. In the oldest parts that remembered a time before his species had built cities or developed language, an ancient warning system activated. It was the same system that had once told his distant ancestors when a predator was nearby. It was supposed to be useless now, a relic of primitive times, but it was screaming at him. It was telling him that he was not looking at a student. He was looking at something that had clawed its way to the top of a death world. He was looking at a survivor. He was looking at a predator. And for the first time in his 400 years of life, Instructor Keth Valen understood what it felt like to be prey. Keth Valen tried to speak. He opened his mouth. He formed words in his mind. He commanded his voice to work. Nothing came out. His throat had closed. His body had decided, without asking his permission, that making sounds near this predator was dangerous. Every instinct he had was telling him to be silent, to be still, to not attract attention. The moment stretched. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. The entire class watched as their instructor, the great Keth Valen with his 400 years of experience and his endless confidence, stood frozen before a small human girl. May held his gaze. Her expression had not changed. She was not angry. She was not triumphant. She was simply waiting, the way her ancestors had waited at the end of a long hunt. Then she nodded once, a small movement that somehow felt like the closing of a book. She turned and walked back to her seat. Her footsteps were the only sound in the room. She sat down. She picked up her note-taking device. She looked at Keth Valen as if expecting the lecture to continue. Keth Valen stared at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he gathered his teaching materials and left the room. The class was supposed to last another hour. He did not come back. The students sat in shocked silence for several minutes. Then, slowly, they began to whisper to each other. The Pelori were asking if what they had seen was real. The Vethkai were flashing confused colors. The Marth were comparing notes, trying to make sense of the humans' words. No one laughed at Mei-chan. No one made jokes. No one asked her embarrassing questions about her species. Instead, something new began to happen. A Morath student named Kelix moved from his seat in the middle of the room to an empty desk near May. He did not say anything. He just sat there, closer to her than any student had voluntarily sat before. The next day, a young Pelori named Sathi joined them. She was one of the few who had never laughed at the human jokes. She brought May a small cake from the dining hall, a gesture of friendship that Pelori used when they wanted to apologize. Within a week, a small group had formed around May. They were not the popular students or the powerful ones. They were the ones who had always felt a little different, a little outside, a little vulnerable, They came to her because they had seen what she could do, and they knew that being near her meant being safe. May did not seek leadership. She did not give speeches or make demands. She simply existed, and somehow that was enough. When other students tried to bully the members of her group, they found that something stopped them. Perhaps it was the memory of what had happened in the simulation. Perhaps it was the way May looked at them when they came too close. Perhaps it was the ancient prey instinct that warned them, do not attract the attention of the predator. Cathvallen returned to teaching, but he was different. His lectures became more careful, more respectful. He no longer used any species as an example of weakness or failure. He stopped making jokes about death worlds. When he spoke about humans, which he avoided doing whenever possible, he used neutral language and factual information. He never met May's eyes again. The semester continued. May's grades improved as the mockery stopped and she could focus on her studies. She turned out to be an excellent student, not because she was smarter than everyone else, but because she worked harder and never gave up. She helped her small group with their own studies, patiently explaining concepts that they struggled with, showing them how to break large problems into smaller pieces that could be solved one at a time. When graduation came, Mei-Chun received the highest marks in advanced survival sciences that the Academy had ever recorded. She had not just survived the Category 7 simulation. She had completed it with such skill that the Academy created a new category for her achievement. After the ceremony, a representative from the Galactic Integration Council approached her. He was a tall being with silver skin and 6 arms, an administrator of some kind. Miss Chun, he said, we have been watching your progress with great interest. The council would like to offer you a position. What kind of position? May asked. We want you to train our instructors. Many of them have never encountered Deathworld species before. They do not understand how to evaluate students from hostile environments. They make incorrect assumptions based on fear and ignorance. We believe you could teach them to do better. May considered this for a moment. I have one condition. Name it. Instructor Cathvallen. I want him assigned to a semester-long immersion program on Earth. He should experience a death world directly. It will make him a better teacher. The administrator checked his records. Earth has many regions. Do you have a specific location in mind? May smiled. It was a small smile, but something about it made the administrator's silver skin go slightly pale. Australia, she said. Send him to Australia. The administrator did not understand why this was significant, but he made a note of it. The request was forwarded to Cathvallen through official channels. 2 days later, Cathvallen sent a response. He declined the immersion program, citing health concerns and a sudden interest in retirement. He left the Galactic Integration Academy shortly after and was never seen in public again. May Chun went on to become one of the most respected instructors in galactic history. She taught for over 50 years, helping thousands of students from hundreds of species learn about survival, adaptation, and the true nature of strength. She never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the mockery she had faced. And she never forgot the lesson that she had taught Instructor Cathvallen on that quiet day. When his voice fell silent, humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the fastest, or the smartest, or the most advanced. Their technology was primitive compared to civilizations that had existed for millions of years. Their bodies were soft and fragile compared to species that had evolved. Natural armor, but they came from a world that tried to kill them every single day. A world of predators and poisons, of radiation and disaster, of ice ages and extinctions. A world that should have destroyed them 1,000 times over. And instead of dying, they had learned to fight, to adapt, to survive. They had learned to be the most persistent, most stubborn, most absolutely relentless species that the galaxy had ever known. The galaxy was only beginning to understand what that meant, and when they finally did understand, when they truly grasped what it meant to share the stars with the children of Earth, they would remember the lesson that a small human girl had taught in a classroom on station VELAR-7. They would remember the moment when the instructor's voice fell silent, and they would remember the look in her eyes when she whispered the truth that her species had always known. We are the thing that never stops. We are what survives. We are human, and we are here.